Although he was my father-in-law, it was a nuisance. Dirty and smelly, I'm relieved he's gone. I was always on edge, wondering how long he would live. At the back door of the church, that was Kathy talking to someone. I stood there, shaking with anger. Unforgivable. In place of my late husband Oliver, I decided to expose Kathy's true nature and seek revenge. I watched her quietly with a steely gaze. My name is Flora, 76 years old. I live with my husband and eldest son. But it's not an ordinary family of 3. My husband Oliver developed early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Now, his diabetes has worsened and he's bedridden. We hired a home caregiver, and I also take care of him. Our son Floyd is 46. He's successful at work, now a manager. But he's not married. I envy friends who travel with their spouses, celebrating their children's marriages and grandchildren, but I'm happy we're living comfortably. Then, one day, Floyd said, "I've decided to get married." I was so surprised I almost fainted. I had thought Floyd would never get married. "Really? Marriage? You're not being deceived, are you?" I asked dramatically, and Floyd laughed. "No way. She's from a company we deal with, a really nice girl. She always greets me with a smile." After years without celebrations, I felt increasingly happy for my son. Later, we had a family meeting. His fiancée was Kathy. At the hotel, she arrived in a beautiful dress and greeted me with the calm smile Floyd mentioned. "Flora, nice to meet you. I look forward to being part of your family." She's 34, 12 years younger than Floyd, and I was impressed by her polite greeting and demeanor. I wondered why such a wonderful lady chose Floyd. "Nice to meet you too. I'm sorry my husband couldn't come." "Please, don't apologize. I know about Oliver's condition. But as a family member, let me know if I can be of any help." Her words moved me to tears. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for the good person who came into our lives. I felt embarrassed for even suspecting that Floyd might be getting deceived. Also, my parents couldn't make it either. We couldn't adjust their schedules, I'm sorry. I've told them about the marriage, and they trust my choice, so please don't worry about our family. Kathy said this with a cheerful smile. Indeed, she was here alone. For a moment, I thought it was odd for parents to miss a family meeting, but trusting Kathy's words, I thought she must be a trustworthy daughter and didn't probe further. Then, they got married and started living with me. They didn't have a wedding ceremony, but took wedding photos together. I had hoped for a ceremony, but I suppressed my feelings, knowing it's not just for the parents. A few days later, the wedding photos arrived. Holding back my eagerness, I said to Kathy, "Your wedding photos have arrived." Kathy happily took the envelope from me. "Wow, they've already arrived. Floyd will be thrilled. I'll put them in our room." However, she didn't show any intention of opening them in front of me and took them to their bedroom. Of course, I understood they should see them first, but it was strange that she didn't even seem to want to open them. I kept smiling, though feeling a bit uneasy. Some time later, Kathy quit her job and offered to help me with the caregiving. I was really touched. Taking care of someone else's family is hard to do unless that is your job. It's enough that you're willing to think about it. "But I am family, right?" "Don't worry," Kathy insisted. So, I asked her to check on Oliver when I was busy and be his conversation partner when she had time. "Leave the diapers to me or the home caregiver. Even just asking him if he needs anything is a big help, and talking is good rehabilitation." Kathy readily agreed. But I couldn't understand why I hadn't asked Kathy for help with the caregiving before. Sure, I was considerate. But maybe I didn't fully trust her. At the same time, I felt bad for doubting her, knowing she was a good person. One day, Oliver said, "I think Kathy dislikes me." What? I was surprised. But Oliver had Alzheimer's. His words often lacked consistency. I reassured him. "That's not true. She's a wonderful person who cares about family. No. That's wrong. Why would you say that? Then, Oliver looked me in the eyes and said, she looks at me with a mocking smile. It's scary. I fell silent at his words. Then laughed it off. It's nice to be smiled at by someone young, isn't it? I knew it was a delusion, but the thought of how Kathy might really be looking at Oliver sent chills down my spine. Then, one day, almost forgetting about it, I received a call from the home caregiver who visits Oliver. A call, even though she visits daily? Confused, I answered, and she said, I need to talk to you about something. I was wondering what it was about. The words came out was never expected. Floyd's wife Kathy. I think it's better if she doesn't get involved with Oliver anymore. Why? What happened? Oliver seems frightened of her. Maybe she's saying something unpleasant to him. Her words reminded me of what Oliver had said. If Kathy was really saying such things to Oliver, I felt responsible for asking her to check on him. After hanging up, I muttered, I can't just sit back. I hurried to Oliver's room. Oliver? I need to ask you something. But it was too late to talk to Oliver. Just hours after eating his meal cheerfully, he had peacefully passed away and gone to heaven. I didn't remember much about what happened next. I was busy making calls, arranging for a doctor's visit, but the doctor only shook his head. Before I knew it, I was at the church Floyd had arranged. The date must have changed, but I haven't slept or eaten, so I've lost all sense of time. My body and soul are exhausted, and instead of feeling relieved from caregiving, I'm overwhelmed with loneliness. It should have been hard, but all I can remember is Oliver when he was healthy. Thinking of that, I just couldn't stop crying. Flora. While Floyd was busy as the family representative, Kathy was there, concerned about me, staying by my side. Her parents couldn't come for the farewell due to the distance, but they sent a wreath and a letter through Kathy. Though I was still troubled by the home caregiver's words, I couldn't believe that Kathy, raised in such a wonderful family, would harass Oliver. Then, someone appeared in front of Kathy and me. Please accept my sincere condolences. A few people greeted us deeply. Kathy stood up to greet them on my behalf. They seemed to be from Floyd's company. Kathy must know them from her time at the client company. Flora, please stay seated. Kathy told me, then thanked them for their attendance and led them to Oliver. I was completely reassured by her demeanor. And the wake ended. Gradually coming to terms with Oliver's passing, I felt guilty for leaving everything to Floyd and Kathy and started greeting the attendees. But most had left, and I couldn't see Kathy. Where's Kathy? She's not here. Maybe she's still seeing people off. I'll go check. I told Floyd and headed to the parking lot. Then, from behind the church, I heard Kathy's voice. I found you. I muttered to myself. It was dark, and I was likely unseen from the other side. However, Kathy, illuminated by the church's back door light, seemed to be talking to a man. It's finally over. I stopped at those words. Well, it went according to plan, didn't it? But still, he was such a nuisance. Dirty and smelly, I'm glad he's gone. I was always restless, wondering how long he would live. I turned pale. Was that really Kathy? But I clearly heard her voice, and it was Kathy in front of me. So, when are you divorcing? Once the inheritance comes in, I'll transfer it to my bank account, then probably. That guy seemed to have less than I thought, but Floyd should inherit at least $100,000. Floyd got himself caught by a real piece. It's his fault for being deceived. I stood there, trembling with anger. I had suspected something was off. Kathy targeted Floyd for his inheritance. I couldn't forgive her. I swore to myself. Kathy then entered through the back door. The man, unaware I had witnessed yesterday's scene, left in a white luxury car and appeared at the funeral the next day as if nothing had happened. Ah, Richard, thank you for coming on your day off. Floyd greeted him. Apparently, he was a subordinate at Floyd's company. "No, Floyd. I know it's tough, but please don't overdo it." "Thank you." "Thank you." Kathy also greeted politely beside Floyd. Just yesterday, they were laughing and chatting like close friends. When I thought this, I noticed his simple ring on the left ring finger. A simple ring was worn on the ring finger. The ring indicated he was married, and at the same time, I wondered if he could be involved with Kathy. The reason they stayed till the end, talking in a secluded spot, and the way they hid their relationship today, unlike their friendly interaction yesterday, all felt off. It didn't take long for my suspicions to turn into certainty. They exchanged glances and laughed together, trying not to be noticed by anyone. How inappropriate. But first, I had a duty to see Oliver off. I managed to hide my anger and fulfill my duties until the end. A few days after the funeral, I finally calmed down and told Floyd first. I mentioned the talk with the home caregiver, the conversation with Richard, and many other things that felt off. Initially, Floyd laughed it off, saying it was all in my head and impossible. If Floyd didn't believe me, I had to consider what to do next. Seeing me troubled, he said, "Let's drop this topic. Do you have any other concerns?" "I think it's all Mom's misunderstanding." Desperate to make him believe Kathy's wrongdoings, I blurted out. "By the way, what about the wedding photos? I haven't seen them." "Wedding photos? Haven't they arrived yet?" Floyd asked, puzzled. I replied, "They've arrived long ago, and Kathy put them away." "Really? Why didn't she tell me they arrived?" "I don't know. You should ask her." Floyd asked Kathy that day, in front of me. Kathy looked momentarily flustered but quickly composed herself and said, "Oh, those. I sent them to my parents' house to show them. You know, they haven't met Floyd yet, and I wanted to show him off. I'll ask them to send it back." She was quite talkative, I thought. Indeed, she had always been explanatory. As if hiding lies by talking about things no one had asked. Floyd almost seemed convinced, so without wasting a moment, I said to her, "I would like to see them too. Can you get just the photos sent first? Maybe I should call them." At my words, Kathy hurriedly said, "No, my parents are not good with relative relations." "Oh, but they wrote a letter besides sending a wreath at the funeral? They seem very polite for people who are bad with relatives." Kathy fell silent. Seeing this, Floyd must have felt something was off too. "Call your parents right now. I want to greet them." Kathy still didn't move. I exchanged glances with Floyd. I couldn't fathom her thoughts, but it was clear she was hiding something. In the end, she never contacted her parents, and we never saw the wedding photos. Probably, they were already thrown away. I think she didn't have a wedding because she planned to divorce from the start. Regret fills me, thinking if I had paid attention to my feelings back then, I might have realized her true nature sooner and spared Oliver from suffering. That's why I'm determined not to let her have her way. From that day, Kathy became distant. Worried about her true identity being revealed and possibly being driven out of the house. Then, I received a call from the dispatch company of the home caregiver who took care of Oliver. Apparently, there was an issue with Oliver's diary during an audit, and they wanted to discuss it. That day, 2 people, seemingly from the health department, arrived at our house with a tense atmosphere. Actually, there are descriptions in the home caregiver's diary suggesting that a family member was abusing Mr. Oliver. Abuse? I was so shocked that I exclaimed loudly. "What? How could? I've always been careful." "Please calm down. Here is the home caregiver's diary." I looked at the diary handed to me by the officer. Then, I saw shocking words. April 13th, report of Oliver saying he was hit by Kathy. However, no bruises were found, and it seemed to be due to his dementia. I felt tense reading these words. Seeing my reaction, the officer continued. May 7th, upon visiting, Kathy was seen leaving Oliver's room. When asked what she said to him, he reported she told him to go away. For several days after, he was listless and became fearful when she was mentioned, so it was reported to Flora. That was the last entry in the diary. That was the day Oliver passed away. My hands started shaking, and I couldn't stop my tears. Now that Oliver is gone, we can't know the truth for sure, but may we speak with Kathy? I nodded quietly several times. It may not be the direct cause, but to hear go away on the day he passed away. It feels like that was the cause, from a family's point of view. I told the health department officers that Kathy was upstairs. Concerned about my tears, they headed upstairs together.
Who's there? What do you want?
Kathy, shouting loudly upstairs, apparently refused to talk to the officers after learning their reason for visiting, saying, "I don't know anything. Oliver had dementia, it's not my fault. If you refuse to talk, we'll have to involve the police and conduct an investigation." As soon as Kathy heard the officer's loud voice, she stopped making noise. She must have stopped resisting. "Can we talk to you at the health department, not here?" Out of concern for me, they decided to talk with her at the health department instead. As Kathy came downstairs, our eyes met.
"Flora, please tell them it's a misunderstanding."
Her face pale, she begged me for help. But after seeing the diary, her words didn't resonate with me. "Reflect on your actions and explain yourself." Kathy must have thought I would support her. Surprised by my unexpected words, she was lost for words. It was past noon when the health department officers arrived, but she didn't return until late at night. When I explained everything to Floyd, who returned home earlier, he turned pale with anger. Finally realizing Kathy's true nature, he talked about divorce. "Wait. There's something else that bothers me." I then told him about the suspicious relationship between Kathy and Richard, whom she met at the back door on the day of the funeral. She was having an affair? Even knowing Kathy's true nature, the shock was evident, and Floyd slumped down. "I can't be sure. But it didn't sound like a conversation with an employee from a business partner." Floyd sighed at my words. "Let's pretend we don't know anything for a while and observe the situation," he suggested. I nodded in agreement, thinking about what to do next. Kathy returned home late that day. She was exhausted and said she couldn't eat.
"I did nothing wrong, but nobody believes me. Even you, Flora, it's unfair."
Kathy burst into tears. She seemed greatly disheartened, having been scolded thoroughly by the health department. Later, I was contacted by the health department, who said I could file a complaint on behalf of Oliver. Kathy doesn't seem to be reflecting, and I don't plan to let her off either. Things are about to get busy. Floyd hired a detective to keep an eye on Kathy's actions. Soon enough, evidence surfaced. Kathy and Richard met secretly 3 times in 1 week. Moreover, Richard would meet Kathy while supposedly out on sales visits and go to a hotel. Naturally, this was grounds for his dismissal. Richard's outings were supposedly for prospecting new clients. Next time he says that, "Let's set up a stakeout." I decided to get notified when he left under that pretext. That day came quickly. After lunch, Kathy left without saying where she was going. As I suspected, Floyd called. Rushing to the meeting place, Floyd was already there, looking defeated. Though expected, I was also at a loss for words. In his line of sight were, as anticipated, Richard and Kathy. Unaware of us, they walked arm in arm into the hotel. 2 hours later, they emerged the same way, and Floyd and I confronted them.
"What the hell do you two think you're doing?" "Floyd!"
At Floyd's voice, the two turned, their faces turning pale. Floyd stood before them, glaring at Kathy and then Richard.
"What is this? Explain."
It was daytime in a hotel district. Nearby was a supermarket, attracting various onlookers.
This is...
Kathy, panicking, moved away from Richard, her face pale and eyes darting.
"So, you two were in this kind of relationship?"
I also followed and shouted loudly at the two of them. It seemed that Kathy finally realized I was there because of my voice. And my voice probably drew the attention of the onlookers around us. One of the bystanders said,
"Isn't that Richard? You know, Sharon from the kindergarten's father." "Really? Wow, an affair?"
Apparently, they knew Richard. I knew Richard was married, but I didn't know he had a child. Hearing those words, Richard fled with a pale face.
"Wait, hold on."
Kathy called after him, but Richard likely couldn't hear her anymore.
"We're getting a divorce. And of course, you'll pay a hefty settlement."
At Floyd's words, Kathy, pale-faced, sat down on the spot, crying. Afterward, the complaint I filed was accepted, and I was told I could seek compensation from Kathy on Oliver's behalf. Currently, I'm in discussions with a lawyer. In the meantime, Kathy and Floyd divorced. The inheritance originally meant for Oliver went entirely to Floyd, and Kathy was sued for the affair's damages. Richard, who had the affair during work hours, was fired. His family found out, leading to his divorce as well. Kathy was now faced with demands for compensation from Richard's family. Now she regrets her actions, but it's too late. It turned out she had approached Floyd for money, and her parents didn't even know about her marriage. After all the commotion, we finally met her parents, who deeply apologized. It turns out she had arranged the wreath and letters herself. To go to such lengths to make herself appear as a good wife to us, I'm astounded at her meticulous deceit. But in the end, her marriage left her with nothing but debt. This experience will surely be a lifelong barrier for her. Afterward, life with Floyd alone began. With everything over, there's relief but also loneliness. However, a few years later, Floyd said he was getting married. After Kathy, I couldn't approve, but the woman Floyd brought was the home caregiver who had always looked after Oliver. "I never expected this connection, but I'm glad to meet you again. Please let me visit Oliver's grave." I knew her well. And I thought, with her, Floyd could surely be happy. As I believed, a year after their marriage, a lovely baby was born. I never thought I'd become a grandmother, so every day is filled with happiness. My goal now is to stay healthy to watch this child grow. And someday, when I reunite with Oliver in heaven, I want to watch over our son's family together from above. My name is Luna. I was a 28-year-old who worked in a flower shop located in an office building, creating flower arrangements. My husband, Oliver, was 30, 2 years older than me, and worked as a hairstylist in the same building on the second floor. He was not exactly a celebrity stylist, but he was quite popular. We were celebrating our 3rd year of marriage that year. Apart from the fact that we had been unable to have children, I thought we were doing well as a happy couple. But it seemed I was the only one who thought that way. How did we first meet? Oliver used to frequently buy flowers for his salon from the flower shop on the 1st floor. Initially wary of Oliver, who was skilled in conversation due to his job, I gradually found it natural to have him by my side. How long was it after we started dating? Oliver invited me to dinner at his parents' house, saying he wanted to introduce me to his family. There, Oliver's brother and his fiancée were also present. I had heard about Oliver's struggles being compared to his excellent younger brother, but his brother was unpretentious and amiable, easy to talk to. Handsome, good-natured, and dependable, his brother had it all. Can't blame the parents for comparing, really. His fiancée, too, was beautiful and seemed quite talented. A stunningly attractive couple. Sitting opposite them, I couldn't help but wonder if I would be compared to his brother's bride-to-be if I married Oliver. During the lively conversation over dinner,
"Have you guys decided on a date for the wedding ceremony?"
Oliver asked his brother. Then, "We're about to decide. We'd love some suggestions for good venues," the brother and his fiancée replied. Oliver's brother, a promising banker, and his fiancée, working at a securities firm, were both solid professionals. Thinking they would prefer something luxurious, considering they'd invite bosses and work colleagues, I suggested some famous venues where my corporate friends had their weddings. The fiancée searched the venues on her mobile phone, happily engrossed in a page showing a venue with a garden chapel. Then Oliver chimed in.
Hey, why don't we do the wedding ceremony together? How about a restaurant wedding?
And so he had proposed with a casual tone. It was something I had hoped would happen eventually, but I was shocked by his sudden suggestion, especially since he hadn't yet formally met my parents. Then, from somewhere, I heard a distinct sking noise. I couldn't believe it, but it seemed like the sound came from my BIL's fiancée. She was making an incredibly dissatisfied face and muttering under her breath.
BIL's girlfriend might be okay with such a ceremony, but
Then Lucas, Oliver's brother, exclaimed,
Bro, that's a great idea. These kinds of stylish ceremonies are becoming more popular.
He seemed genuinely excited about Oliver's suggestion. Being more displeased, the fiancée glared at me more, as if to stop Oliver from saying whatever he wanted. But she was glaring at the wrong person. If she had a problem, I wished she would speak up to the enthusiastic brothers instead. Subsequently, driven by the brothers' excitement, we ended up planning a restaurant wedding, and everything progressed quickly. In a flurry, we managed to greet my parents, and the four of us dined out to choose a venue. As days passed, the once disgruntled fiancé warmed up to Oliver, who was now BIL, and they got along so well that one would think they were the couple getting married. However, her attitude towards me remained unchanged. And so, 6 months later, the two couples held their restaurant weddings. After the marriage, I switched from full-time to part-time at work, focusing more on household chores. I left for work after sending Oliver off, returned home earlier to prepare dinner, and waited for Oliver's return. This became my routine. Sometimes, my BIL and his wife, both working full-time, relied on our dinner unexpectedly. It seemed cooking was too much of a hassle for them. Camila, my CL, came with just a token gift, evidently expecting me to cook, sparing herself the effort. At the dinner table, Camila oddly sat next to Oliver instead of her husband, treating me more like a convenient housekeeper. Honestly, their visits were far from welcome. Moreover, she indirectly criticized me, saying I looked plain or that my only talent was messing with flowers. I couldn't stand being demeaned in front of Oliver, but I hated confrontations, so I pretended not to mind Camila's words. Instead, after they left,
Why does she look down on people so much? It's terrible to imply someone's worthless if they don't work at an office.
I vented to Oliver.
She's a competent and successful woman. Maybe you're just hearing it that way, Luna. It sounds like you're envious. You shouldn't say things like that.
But his response was always defensive of Camila. Oliver, proud of his brother's achievements, seemed unwilling to hear anything negative about his brother's wife. It felt like he was implying I was the problem, listing all of Camila's virtues instead. Recently, my daily life had changed a bit due to Lucas's sudden solo assignment. Camila, too, seems somewhat reluctant to come uninvited to our dinners alone. With fewer visits from her, I was free from her snide comments and had been able to spend my days more peacefully. But now, a different worry had surfaced. For some reason, Oliver had been coming home late at night, day after day, leaving me to have dinner and go to bed alone. It was really worrying that he had been returning home after midnight so frequently. I hoped he didn't fall ill. One morning, as Oliver hurriedly got ready for work.
You've been coming home late recently. Are you okay? I'm worried you might wear yourself out.
I asked him. Oliver didn't even look at me.
No need to worry. It's just a contest. I'm busy preparing for a hair contest.
He stammered.
I haven't heard anything about a hair contest.
Usually, he'd make a big deal about entering a hair contest weeks in advance, but this time, nothing. Isn't that strange? Sensing his haste, I asked.
When is this contest? You didn't mention it before. Did you decide to enter suddenly?
Without turning face to me, he replied.
Yeah, that's right. I overlooked the invitation. I've been busy arranging for a cut model and stuff.
He didn't even look at me. Come to think of it, when a contest was near, a really cute cut model used to come to the salon after hours.
Is she coming this time too? Is it the same cut model you usually have? I asked nonchalantly. Oliver exaggeratedly replied. Yeah, that's right. I've been keeping her late. Really, I feel so bad about it. His manner of speaking seemed exaggerated. What is this? This feels so forced. Doesn't his speech sound unnatural? Despite my feelings. Is that really okay? It's dangerous to keep a girl late every day, even if you're short on time. When I looked at Oliver, he seemed determined to avoid eye contact. Glancing at his watch, he said, Ah. Look at the time. I'm going to be late. Ignoring my words, he hurried out the door. Did he just run away? That reaction was so unnatural. Am I overthinking this? Could it be something with the cut model, an affair? No, that can't be it. The more I thought about it, the worse my thoughts got. After all, such things are unthinkable, aren't they? It's just my bad habit of overthinking. I need to stop that. It's just the late nights because of the hair contest preparations, that's all. Carrying these troubled thoughts, I got ready and headed to work. When I arrived at the shop, Mason, the manager of the salon where Oliver worked, was there picking out flowers for the salon. It was usually Oliver who picked the flowers, so it was unusual to see Mason here. Mason said he leaves the flower selection to Oliver because he doesn't know much about them. Could it be that Oliver asked Mason to pick the flowers to avoid further questions about this morning's conversation? I decided to probe a little. Oliver is participating in a hair contest with you, right? Good luck with that, I said to Mason. But Mason looked confused. Which hair contest? We don't have any such plans, he asked. I also asked about the cut model, but he said they hadn't requested any recently. Apparently, the model was Mason's cousin, who was currently studying abroad. As for the late nights, Mason said that Oliver had been leaving the salon at the regular closing time, so there was no way he had to come home after midnight. It seemed like everything Oliver told me was a lie. So, what had Oliver been doing every night, and with whom? While my suspicion about the cut model was cleared, I still felt uneasy. Stunned and trying to grasp the situation. Should I subtly ask him about it? Mason offered. I thought about accepting Mason's offer, but would Oliver give him a straight answer? I felt like Oliver, being so good at talking, would give vague responses. It seemed more likely that something was going on. I didn't want to give Oliver any chance to concoct an excuse. I had to keep it a secret that I was aware of his lies and probing into the matter. I told Mason that I would handle it myself for now, and asked him to keep our conversation secret, saying I would seek his advice if needed. That night, I decided to wait for Oliver and ask him as if I was oblivious to everything. I doubted he would tell me the truth anyway. Around midnight, Oliver finally came home. While claiming to have been working late, he looked slightly startled when he saw me waiting up. I'm home. I'm exhausted. Finally got the new haircut done, he said, unaware that I knew everything. I wondered what kind of amazing haircut he completed. I asked Oliver, who was trying to mask his nervousness. You must be worn out. Hey, do you mind if I ask something? As I spoke quietly. What's up? What do you want to know? His voice trembled. Are you really working? Are you really preparing for a hair contest? Oliver replied. Well, of course I am. What else would it be? His unease was apparent. He seemed intent on sticking to his lies. In that case. Oh? What about cheating? Yes or no? I asked directly, and his face changed completely. What? Of course I'm not. Oliver began to get defensive. Even the usually eloquent Oliver had no room for jokes. Despite his panic, he tried to weave an escape with desperate excuses. You know, Mason told me. The hair contest is a lie, right? Wouldn't it be better to just come clean? What are you really doing? I cornered him with no escape. Apparently, he had no excuses left and trembling with clenched fists.
Fine. I'll say it. It's an affair. I've fallen in love with someone else.
He blurted out. His confession came off as resigned and frustrated. He even started to get angry, as if it was some sort of injustice. I tried to get him to confess who the other person was, but he refused to say, probably because it was someone he shouldn't be involved with. No matter how much I pressed, my anger only grew.
Then, I'll hire a detective or whatever it takes to find out. Just be ready.
It's Camila. Hearing my words, he went pale and confessed in a defeated tone.
Camila? Isn't she Lucas's wife?
I was shocked, and he retorted.
Yes, Camila. She's pregnant with my child.
You haven't had a child with me, but you did with someone else, and that someone is your brother's wife? That's despicable. As I hurled accusations at Oliver, he retorted with unreasonable words.
It's your fault for being infertile. Anyway, I'm going to take responsibility and divorce you.
His words were infuriatingly unfair. That explained why he always sided with his Sael over me.
Are you kidding? Do you even realize what you're saying? Does Lucas know?
To have been treated this way by him, I couldn't help but be angry.
It doesn't matter. Camila and I won't be separated. She's going to divorce Lucas and be with me. No one can stop us.
Oliver declared defiantly.
If you don't like it, then let's get a divorce right now.
Disgusted by his words, I retorted.
Don't like it? That's an understatement. I'll gladly divorce you.
I decided then and there to cut ties with this hopeless man. The next day, I told everything to my parents, my in-laws, and Lucas, who was at his assignment location. Shocked and furious, they couldn't believe Oliver and Camila had an affair and were expecting a child. Despite their family's reactions, both were unapologetic and brazen.
All this is Asael's fault, right? If she's upset about the affair or didn't notice it, it's her own fault. If Lucas wants to blame someone, he should blame Asael.
Camila even had the audacity to put the blame on me. Their lack of remorse disgusted everyone. Lucas decided to divorce Camila, and both Oliver and Camila were disowned by our parents and Lucas. Later, when I reported the situation to Mason, the concerned salon manager.
He was one of our recommended hairstylists. This could affect our salon's reputation. I need to think about what to do with Oliver,
he said while crossing his arms. 3 months later, after Camila's remarriage prohibition period ended, she and Oliver got married. Yet, for some reason, I was getting calls from Oliver on my mobile phone. I was at work, and as far as I was concerned, he was a person from my past. I had nothing to say to him, yet he kept calling persistently if I ignored him. Oliver, still somehow keeping his job under Mason's management and working in the beauty salon on the second floor, was someone I don't want showing up at the flower shop. Reluctantly, I answered the call. "Hey, can you help me out here?" His voice was weak and pitiful. A far cry from his earlier bravado.
Why should I? I have no obligation to help you. Can you stop bothering me during work?
As I was about to hang up. Don't be so cold. Can I come over to talk? Oliver appeared to really want to talk. Not wanting him to actually come, I decided to listen. It turned out he was in quite a laughable predicament. According to Oliver, on the day they registered their marriage, Camila received a demand for alimony in a divorce lawsuit via a formal notice.
What's this about?
He questioned, and it turned out Camila had been having an affair with her boss, and his wife found out, demanding $50,000 in alimony. Moreover, she was pregnant, and it was unclear whether the child was Oliver's or her boss's. He might end up raising a child that isn't his.
I have no confidence in raising a child that might not be mine. Tell me how to get a divorce.
His SOS to me was the last thing I needed.
Just say what you told me,
was all the advice I gave.
That's it.
That was the last call I ever received from Oliver.
Nevertheless, both my former sister-in-law and ex-husband were such despicable people. They were both broke after paying us alimony in the divorce suits. Oliver was likely to be fired by Mason now, and with Camila's affair scandal at work, she would probably be fired too, burdened with a hefty debt of $50,000 for alimony. What would they do now? Face bankruptcy? It seemed like a miserable life awaits them, socially and personally obliterated. As for me, I remarried a man who supplies flowers to my shop and am expecting a long-awaited child. I live happily, surrounded by beautiful flowers, a kind and honest husband, and looking forward to holding my lovely child. Despite being called plain, living true to myself is best. I've learned my lesson to stay away from smooth talkers and those who look down on others.
My name is Jasmine. Right now I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room. My husband just served me divorce papers.
If you can't have a child, even if you say you're taking care of mom, we're getting a divorce.
Are you serious?
What's the matter? You don't like that idea? Of course. You'd be in trouble without me, wouldn't you?
My husband chuckles in a creepy way. How did I get here? To answer that, we need to go back a bit. It all started when I took a job at a meat processing company. Soon after starting, I was called into the CEO's office.
Our company's performance has been flat recently. I'm thinking of setting up a subsidiary.
A subsidiary?
In other words, I want to open a steakhouse using the meat processed at our plant.
A steakhouse? You want to make a restaurant a subsidiary?
I'm also considering restaurants focused mainly on meat dishes.
I get that it could be popular, but what does this have to do with me?
You mentioned during your interview that you like cooking, right? I want you to work in our newly found subsidiary.
I had a part-time experience in fast food during my student years, but I've never formally studied cooking. Besides, running a business involves more than just cooking. You have to think about operational efficiency too. I'm still inexperienced in the workforce.
Don't worry. You're not going to be the one responsible for everything.
CEO Terrence said with a smile. Encouraged by Terrence's smile, I decided to join the food subsidiary. However, it's my first year as a working adult. And on the other hand, the company is a startup. There's no guarantee it will take off. There's no way problems won't arise. Yet, I managed to overcome the challenges with the help of my colleagues. Eventually, the subsidiary got on track, and the number of steakhouses and restaurants increased. Over a few years, we opened up 7 steakhouses and 3 restaurants.
You've really pulled it off.
It's thanks to my colleagues. I couldn't have done it on my own.
Wow, I'm really glad I relied on you.
Thank you. As I blush, Terrence suddenly starts a conversation.
So are you free this Sunday?
Is it a business dinner or something?
No, I'd like you to have dinner with my family.
Dinner with your family? Terrence starts explaining, looking a bit apologetic. Turns out, Patricia, Terrence's wife, heard about my accomplishments from Terrence when she visited the office. At that time, I was busy working at a restaurant. Intrigued, Patricia went to the restaurant and saw me working efficiently. She immediately liked what she saw. Patricia then told Terrence, "Wouldn't it be great if a hard-working young woman like this became our son's wife?"
Indeed.
"So let's arrange a dinner."
Dinner? Isn't that a bit sudden?
"The sooner the better. Could you talk to her about it?" Apparently, Patricia has been pretty pushy with Terrence. Terrence bows his head and says,
I'm really sorry, but Patricia insisted and I couldn't say no.
I get it.
Do you mind humoring Patricia for just a dinner?
Terrence's son is destined to become a CEO. Currently, he's the COO. I've crossed paths with him before and remember him as being handsome and kind. So, it's not a bad deal for me either. Understood. I can't refuse without meeting him.
Thank you. I'll confirm the time with Patricia and get back to you.
Terrence looks relieved. Apparently, Patricia had been quite demanding. The whole thing makes me smile a bit. And so comes Sunday. I was set to meet Terrence's son at a high-end French restaurant near the office.
Nice to meet you. I'm the COO, Calvin.
I work for the food services subsidiary. I'm Jasmine. Pleased to meet you today. As we exchange greetings, Patricia says, "You're even more wonderful than I thought." Thank you. If you marry Calvin, I can really rest easy. Well, if he approves. Patricia definitely seems more eager. However, Calvin doesn't look unwilling either. Moreover, we surprisingly hit it off as we talk. Calvin doesn't flaunt his wealth. He's smart and composed, exactly as I'd perceived him at the office. Still, he's the heir to a wealthy family. He wouldn't be interested in an average woman like me. Even so, I gave him my contact information as we said goodbye. But a few days later, against all my expectations, Calvin reached out to me.
Want to go for a drive?
Sure. I was surprised. But we enjoyed a drive date that day. After that, Calvin started contacting me more and more. We went to movies, had meals together, like a couple. Eventually, Calvin asked,
You keep hanging out with me. So, you like me, right?
"Well, I don't dislike you."
How about we seriously date with marriage in mind?
"Wait, marriage?"
Truth is, my parents have been pushing me to get married, but all the women that come my way are just gold diggers. You're different.
Calvin is 3 years older than me. He's good looking and the COO of a company. It's no wonder he attracts gold diggers. And honestly, who wouldn't get tired of that? Suddenly, I felt a newfound affection for Calvin. So, I accepted a relationship with him. We dated for about a year before getting married. But that's where the good times ended. Calvin was incredibly sweet while we were dating. He even helped out at the house right after we got married. But as time passed, he began to be away from home more often, and his late-night returns became frequent. "Calvin, where have you been?"
Where? I've been working. Working!
"But you weren't at the office today. So how is it work?"
I'm the COO. Sometimes I have to work outside the office. You get that, right?
There's no way I could. Sure, I get that sometimes he has to meet with clients, but Calvin has many days when he doesn't even show up at the office. It's not like I can talk to my in-laws about this. Maybe things will settle down soon. After some thought, I decided to tolerate it for a while. But Calvin's behavior never changed. On the contrary, he started becoming more and more abrasive at home.
What the heck is this food?
Did I put something you don't like in it?
It tastes bad. Cook something better.
I'm sorry.
Whatever. I'll go out and get something good to eat.
It was just once or twice that he stormed out like that in the middle of the night. I think he just wanted an excuse to leave. But if I confronted him about it, he'd just yell and that would be the end of it. I was growing more and more discontented. Taking Calvin's silence for granted, he started acting more and more recklessly. One evening, when he hasn't come home yet, I call him. "Calvin, it's already 10 p.m. Aren't you coming home?"
Yeah, work's running late. Go ahead and sleep.
But
Bye.
just like that, he hangs up. I checked at work later, and there were no signs that Calvin had been working overtime. On another day, he leaves early in the morning with a large bag. Where are you going with all that stuff at this hour?
Huh? I'm on a business trip.
To where?
None of your business. I'll be back in 3 days.
Wait! Calvin dashes out of the house. I immediately called his workplace only to find out he had taken a few days of paid leave. All the overtime and business trips were lies. The only thing I can think of is that he's cheating. Still, confronting Calvin only leads to vague excuses. In the end, I consult Patricia, Terrence's wife. And that's what's going on. What? He's cheating? Patricia's face turns red with anger, her hand trembling as she holds a cup. So, Patricia, what should I do? Leave that to me. Leave it to you? What are you going to do? I'll hire a detective to investigate him. If we find proof, he'll pay for it. She slams her cup on the table. She's obviously really angry. But I'm curious about what kind of penalty she's planning. If Calvin loses his job, it'll affect me. She's probably thought of that, but it doesn't make me any less worried. Afterward, Patricia apparently told Terrence about the situation. Naturally, Terrence was furious too. We might even end up divorcing. I won't struggle financially since I still have my job. But Terrence is the CEO, and Calvin works at the same company. If the workplace becomes awkward, I might have to consider finding a new job. I start thinking about changing jobs. That's when it happened. I had been feeling off for a while, so I took a day off work and went to the doctor.
You are 2 months pregnant.
What? Pregnant?
Yes, you're definitely pregnant.
The doctor says, matter-of-factly. Come to think of it, there were signs. But the truth was, I was also stressed about the possibility of Calvin cheating on me. So I wanted to believe that my health issues were just stress-related. First things first, I told Patricia about my pregnancy. So you're pregnant? That means a successor is on the way, right? Yes, I just got it confirmed at the hospital. Oh, congratulations! Thank you. But there's also the issue with Calvin's infidelity. What are you planning to do about that? I definitely want to have this baby. So please keep the evidence of Calvin's cheating on your end. When I said that, Patricia's face clouded over for a moment. Then, she made a suggestion. You know, I've been pondering something for a while. I think now is the time to act on it. What do you mean? Well, I listened to Patricia's proposition. It sounds really promising. I see. I want to go along with your plan, Patricia. Thank you. It's good that I talked to Terrence as well. Does Terrence know about this? Of course. Separate from that, I'll be coming over to your place starting today. Why is that? You're pregnant. It'll be tough to do everything yourself. Plus, we need to light a fire under Calvin. Patricia smiled as she said that. Afterwards, I broke the news about my pregnancy to Terrence when he came home. He was genuinely delighted. Once I reported to Terrence, Patricia and I went home together. Calvin was already back.
Where have you been, Jasmine?
Calvin, why are you yelling?
Mom? Were you with Mom?
Calvin was surprised to see me come home with Patricia. Patricia spoke sternly to Calvin. Jasmine is pregnant, so I'll be staying here for a while to help with housework.
What? Why are you, Mom?
I said I'm here to help with chores.
But
Is there a problem, Calvin?
no, nothing.
Calvin looked bewildered. Clearly, he didn't expect Patricia to stay over. This might make him behave for a change. I held back a smile. Then Patricia, seeing Calvin's gloomy face, said, "Why the long face? This is good news. Don't you have something to say to Jasmine?"
Yeah. Congratulations, Jasmine.
He said it reluctantly. But in front of Patricia, I answered with a smile. "Sure. Thank you."
And give birth to a cute baby, okay?
Despite his words, Calvin looked displeased. Was it because he was seeing someone else or because Patricia would be staying over? Either way, I felt that Calvin wasn't happy. Months went by. Patricia did exactly as she promised and helped me with household chores. And whenever Calvin tried to go somewhere, she'd scold him. "Calvin, where are you going? It's dangerous to leave a pregnant Jasmine alone." Calvin seemed like he wanted to argue, but there was no way he could in this situation. I hope he learns from this, I thought to myself. As I entered my 7th month of pregnancy, I found myself needing Patricia's help more often. "I'm sorry, Patricia." "It's fine, dear. Even putting on socks is a challenge at this stage." While saying this, Patricia helped me put on socks. It's not that I couldn't do it myself, but Patricia understood the struggle and was quick to lend a hand. So I found comfort in her kindness. Patricia also told me she was happy to help. If you think about it, this is her first grandchild. Of course she's delighted. This brought Patricia and me even closer. Later, I went shopping with Patricia. "It's hard, I know, but you need some exercise." Encouraged by Patricia's words, we went out, though it was more challenging than I expected. But we somehow finished shopping and were on our way home. Just as we approached the intersection, a car stopped at the red light, was rear-ended by another. That car then lurched towards us. "Watch out!" I quickly shielded Patricia. We tumbled to the ground. Fortunately, the car swerved past us and came to a halt against a lamppost.
Are you okay?
The driver jumped out of the car, shouting, "Yes, for now." At that moment, Patricia sprang up. "Jasmine, how's the baby?" "I think we're okay. We just fell over." "But that's it. We need an ambulance. To the hospital!" Patricia was frantic, not even noticing she'd scraped her knee. Thanks to her, I remained calm. Soon after, an ambulance arrived, and just to be safe, Patricia and I ended up going to the hospital. Certainly, I wasn't hurt. Patricia just skinned her knee. I felt awkward getting on the ambulance.
Please, don't hesitate. You're pregnant, and even if you're okay now, your condition could change rapidly.
Convinced by the kind words from the EMT, I rode in an ambulance for the first time in my life. So, I was transported back to the hospital. Everything checked out fine there. While I was waiting for Patricia's treatment to finish, Calvin, who got a call from the police, rushed to the hospital. What Calvin blurted out to me in the waiting room was shocking.
If you're not gonna have the baby, let's get a divorce.
In Calvin's hand was a filled-out divorce form. It even seemed he had signed it. "Are you serious?"
Why? You don't want that? You'll be in trouble if we divorce, wouldn't you?
Calvin, creepily smiling, seemed to be misunderstanding something. He also seemed to know that I had suspected his infidelity. He's obviously trying to quash the affair by threatening divorce. Either way, this is my chance. I grabbed the divorce papers from my husband. Just then, Patricia came out from the treatment room. Patricia, Calvin wants a divorce. What? So, we're getting divorced, I cheerfully declared. Calvin then started panicking for some reason.
What are you talking about? You'd be in trouble if we divorce.
No, not at all. Then I'll file this.
Wait a minute.
Calvin tried to stop me. So I told him this. You're the one who brought up divorce, so I'll be taking alimony. I have evidence of your affair, and there are plenty of witnesses here. Everyone in the room focused their attention on us. Of course, since Calvin had raised his voice in the waiting area, suddenly Calvin seemed embarrassed and mumbled,
Stop it. Not here.
You started this. Anyway, I'm filing for divorce. Bye. I left the hospital and got into a taxi. I went home, grabbed a pen, and headed straight to the courthouse. I signed and filed the divorce papers right then and there. When I returned home, Calvin and Patricia were waiting for me.
Jasmine, did you file for divorce without telling me?
You're the one who said let's divorce, remember?
Well, that's,
Besides, I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but I am having the baby. Acknowledge it. In the end, Calvin agreed to acknowledge our child after Patricia scolded him. He agreed to divorce after agreeing to pay me alimony. After that, I moved back to my parents' home. Currently on leave, I'm considering quitting my job now that I'm divorced. It would be awkward to bump into Terrence, the CEO, or my ex-husband Calvin at the office. But first things first, I have a baby on the way. Let's think about the job situation after the baby is born. So, I focused on giving birth at my parents' home. After some time, I successfully gave birth in a stress-free environment. Both mom and baby were doing well, and I was able to return to work 6 months later. Thanks to Terrence's thoughtfulness, I was reassigned to a subsidiary. That way, I rarely have to see Calvin. I worked hard, not just for myself, but also for my newborn son, Louis. I also made sure to introduce Louis to Patricia and Terrence. He's so cute. He might even take after Patricia around the eyes. You think? Things remained good between Patricia, Terrence, and me, even after the divorce. As for Calvin, he was always out, so I never saw him. Then, after a few years, I got an unexpected call from Patricia. It was to inform me of Terrence's passing. I immediately headed to the church where the funeral was to be held. When I arrived, Patricia was there. Patricia? Jasmine, thank you for coming. Of course. Terrence, well, the CEO still helps me out to this day. I had heard Terrence was sick. Even in the subsidiary, I was kept informed about his condition. So I had heard that he was recuperating from an illness. But I never thought he would pass away this soon. Didn't bring Louis? My mom will bring him later. I'm sure Terrence would have wanted to see him one last time. Thank you. While talking to Patricia, Calvin suddenly showed up.
What's this? A stranger in our midst.
Calvin,
What are you doing here post-divorce? Eyeing the inheritance?
Calvin started making snide comments. Moreover, next to him was a young woman I had never seen before, who said, "Who's this woman? She looks poor." Just as I was getting annoyed, Calvin said to the young woman,
She's an old flame. Don't worry about her.
"Really?"
It's just you now, Kylie. You're the cutest girl in the world.
Confused, I watched their interaction. Then, Patricia, visibly irritated, said to Calvin, "Stop it, Calvin! Jasmine is still my daughter."
What? We're divorced. She's not your stepdaughter anymore.
Calvin yelled, but Patricia was quick to defend me. "Jasmine is a fine daughter. She's legally adopted, you know."
Adopted?
Exactly. I was legally adopted by Terrence and Patricia. This was actually Patricia's idea, suggested when I came to her troubled by Calvin's infidelity. Being adopted makes me their legal daughter, and if I have a child, that child would be their descendant. In simpler terms, even if I passed away, my son Louis would have the right to inherit Terrence and Patricia's estate. Also, the adoption doesn't get nullified if Calvin and I get divorced. Patricia knew this and suggested the adoption.
Mom cares that much about Jasmine and Louis?
She had to because you were cheating. This was the only way to protect Jasmine and Louis. Calvin was stunned by Patricia's stern words.
Wait, so I don't get any inheritance, but she does? That's not fair.
Well, nothing we can do. Spouses don't get inheritance rights, but I'll share what I get with Kylie.
I can't accept this.
Kylie, the younger woman, kept making a scene till the end, but making noise wouldn't solve anything. In the end, Calvin managed to calm Kylie down, and the funeral went smoothly. Months later, the distribution of Terrence's estate was decided. Many heirs were involved, each inheriting a share. Some got cash, while Patricia inherited stock in a meat processing company. Calvin and I divided the subsidiary companies between us. The subsidiary is split into two companies, one operating steak restaurants and the other operating restaurants. He got the steakhouse chain, and I got the restaurant chain.
Serve you right. You're just an adopted daughter. You won't get as much as a real child like me.
True. Calvin's assets were more valuable, so he said that out of spite. Although it stung, I couldn't complain, because this was decided before Terrence passed away. I later became the CEO of the restaurant company. With my existing expertise and help from colleagues, the business is doing quite well. Calvin, on the other hand, ran his steakhouse business into the ground. Within half a year, all locations were closed, and the company went bankrupt. Calvin came crying to me soon after.
Jasmine, make me an executive in your company.
Why should I?
We were once close, right?
You had the bigger company and you failed. Why are you saying this now?
But
enough! If you keep bothering me, I'll sue you. I finally told him off, and Calvin backed down. Soon after the company's downfall, Kylie vanished. Now, Calvin is scraping by with a part-time delivery job. I learned this from an employee of the company Calvin ruined. Many of those employees are now working hard to relaunch a steakhouse under my company. I am busy, but still determined, remembering how I felt when Terrence first gave me responsibilities.
Boy, what a life to be bedridden, huh? Despite it not being my fault, I have partial paralysis. Mother-in-law freely throws insults my way. I'm not just lazing around at home, touching the computer all day without working. You're such a useless daughter-in-law. I swear. She might not understand, but this is my job now. Then you can't even have kids, can you? Who needs a daughter-in-law like that? Fine, I'll leave. Just as you wish. My name is Alice. I am 32. I guess you could say I am a novelist. I started writing in my 20s and have been publishing books under a pseudonym. Lately, they have finally started selling, and my income is becoming stable. My husband, Nick, is 35 and works at a publishing house. I met him during a meeting about the book adaptation of a novel I had serialized in a magazine for young women. We've been married for almost 2 years now, but no kids yet. It's not that we don't want children, but if they're not given to us, so be it. Right after we got married, I received several serialization offers, and the sales of my book started to rise, making me busy with bookstore promotion campaigns. It wasn't exactly the right time to be thinking about making babies. But considering our ages, I don't want to wait too long because pregnancy can be harder as you get older. Now that my work has settled a bit, I do find myself wanting a child. Since I write from home, I can continue to work while pregnant, consulting with my health as needed. It's easier since I'm not commuting to an office. Nick and I live with his parents in his childhood home. Mother-in-law Claire is 58 and works at a supermarket near the in-laws' house. Father-in-law Kendrick is 60, and it seems he's set to retire from his company this year. Nick is an only child, so living with Kendrick and Claire was a condition of our marriage. I didn't mind leaving my hometown or living with them, and agreed to it as long as I could continue my writing. The in-laws' house is a somewhat old 2-story wooden building, and we live upstairs. The stairs might have met the building standards back then, but they're pretty steep compared to newer houses, and they are scary enough that you have to be careful going up and down. It's not a completely separate household, but we're supposed to interfere as little as possible in each other's lives. Yet, within a month, I was treated entirely like a housekeeper. I am up before everyone else to clean. I start preparing breakfast before anyone else wakes up. Nick says Claire never made breakfast when he was little, but it seems she expects it from me. Innocently, the in-laws are thrilled to have a warm meal from the morning. At first, I thought it was okay if it made them happy, but it's unbearable to do it every day. After all, it takes away from my time for housework and cuts into my sleep if I want to get my work done. That's why some mornings are hard to get up. And still, Claire says, "Alice, you work from home, right?" It's not much different from being a homemaker. Everyone else works outside, so doing that much won't bring divine punishment. She doesn't lift a finger to help. Sure, I work from home, but I'm not playing around. Sometimes I struggle with writing ideas, and sometimes I need to go out for a change of scenery. Even while doing household chores, my mind is always running at full speed. It's frustrating not being understood by the in-laws I live with. From the beginning, Kendrick and Claire's only concern was whether I would produce an heir. "Alice, how old are you again?" 30, right? If only you were a bit younger," Claire would say without batting an eye. Kendrick too.
Hurry up and show me your grandchild's face. If you want, I could even lend a hand.
He'd say things that sounded almost like sexual harassment. "And Nick, you could have any young lady you want. I wonder why you ended up with an unsuccessful novelist, Claire would say to my face. But I'm not an unsuccessful novelist. I published hardcover books. It's just that Claire wouldn't read the kind of books I write, so she wouldn't know. I can't help but think how someone can speak so freely about another person's job without knowing anything about it. It was when I was feeling down from these remarks that Nick approached me to talk about living expenses. The publishing companies hit a slump too. My salary's getting cut. You've been making more lately, right? Can you help out a bit? Nick told me that the in-laws' house was built by his grandpa, but because the land value skyrocketed over the years, the inheritance tax was a hefty sum. They had to take out a loan to pay it off, and they still owe money on top of the monthly bills in yearly property tax. It's just too much for Kendrick and Claire's income to handle. Since Nick's income was the most stable, he'd been covering it, and they'd ask him not to move out of the in-laws' house even before he got married. Being treated like a housekeeper and constantly berated, I honestly didn't want to agree. I can pay the money if necessary, but can't we live apart? I can't take it anymore. I turned Nick down with those words. What can I do? I'm the only son and the eldest. It's impossible. Nick said, looking sorry. I don't dislike Nick, but the thought of divorce began to cross my mind, unable to bear living with Kendrick and Claire any longer. However, I immediately dismissed the idea. After 2 years of marriage, Claire started to openly berate me for not having children. At first, I could laugh it off, but now my patience is running thin. Don't you have kids yet? Maybe a daughter-in-law over 30 just won't do. Maybe there's something wrong with you. I have my health checkups every year and gynecological exams too. There's nothing wrong with my body. But lately, I've been concerned about Nick's late returns. The making love that used to happen several times a week when we first got married has now become very infrequent. During the day, I'm busy catching up on housework, and I had to cut down on sleep to get everything done, which left me with little time for Nick, and I feel bad about that. But whenever possible, I've tried to respond to Nick's advances, even initiating at times. Lately, even when Nick comes home early and I make the move, sorry, I'm just tired. Maybe I'm getting old. Not tonight, he would say, not engaging. With the years ticking by since we've been married, I wish Nick would agree to get tested too if I don't get pregnant soon. But I couldn't bring myself to suggest it. I didn't want to seem like I was blaming him. Yet, I'm fed up with Kendrick and Claire's daily gripes about us not having a child. And as I am approaching my mid-30s, I heard it gets harder to conceive, which makes me anxious. One morning, I overslept by accident and heard Claire yelling from downstairs. I was so sleep-deprived from the daily chores and work till late at night that I just couldn't wake up. In a panic, I jumped out of bed and tried to run down the stairs with my mind still foggy. I slipped and tumbled all the way down. I think a loud noise echoed throughout the house, but I had no idea what had happened. Next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance. I could hear the paramedics talking but couldn't make out the words. Every part of me hurt, and I couldn't move. I felt my consciousness slipping away. When I woke up, I was in the hospital's ICU, laid up in bed, connected to all sorts of machines. It was like a scene from a medical drama, but it felt so unreal. The diagnosis was a compression fracture of the hip. I suffered nerve damage, and now I can't feel anything below my waist. It's like this isn't even my body anymore. The doctor said that even with a rehabilitation program, I probably won't recover and I'll have to live in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. That realization just plunged me into darkness. A month later, my fractures healed, but the severed nerves wouldn't reconnect. I remained paralyzed from the waist down and had to move back to my in-laws' house after being discharged. I got a certificate for my paralysis and received a disability ID card. I never imagined this would be me. If someone pushes me, I can get around in a wheelchair, but my in-laws' house is old and cramped, impossible to navigate. My husband and I moved into Kendrick and Claire's first floor room, while they took the second floor. But Claire said, "Useless and bedridden? Kicking us old folks upstairs? What a terrible daughter-in-law!" I spit it out. I felt so helpless and frustrated, knowing the fall down on the stairs wasn't my fault. Tears just wouldn't stop. Luckily, my job is writing novels, which I've always done from home, so I can still write from bed. I switched to submitting my manuscripts electronically, so I don't have to hand deliver them or meet the editors unless it's absolutely necessary. They can come to me. Resuming work was a relief, but Kendrick and Claire don't seem to understand. "All day just playing on the computer in bed? Must be nice," Claire mocks me.
Not only can't you bear an air, but you're bedridden. A burden, practically trash.
Kendrick scoffs. "You can't do household chores, can't have kids? A daughter-in-law who's no use to anyone might as well leave." Claire snaps without a pause. Then one day, Nick said something unbelievable.
"Hey, let's get a divorce."
I was stunned, disbelieving.
With your condition, kids are out of the question, right? I can't live with a woman who can't have them.
The shock was like a blow to the head, worse than being paralyzed. I was too heartbroken to even cry. The next day, Claire said to me, "You're divorcing my son, huh? Oh, thank goodness. It's miserable for him to be with a woman who can't have kids." I hated the look on Claire's face as she said this while laughing. "It would have been easier if he had just died when he fell down the stairs." Is Claire serious? I started to get scared, thinking about what might happen if I don't leave soon. If something happens, I can't move easily because I can't control my body. And there's no one on my side at my in-laws' house. I contacted my disability support coordinator to urgently find me a new place to live. Luckily, I found a new place to move into quite quickly and was able to breathe a sigh of relief. It's a barrier-free one-bedroom rental apartment. I wanted to be as far from my in-laws' house as possible, but unfortunately, it was just in the next town. Still, eager to leave the in-laws' house as soon as possible, I decided to move in right away. The divorce mediation with Nick hadn't started yet, but I wanted to ensure my safety first. I decided to have the government official come over while my in-laws were out and proceed with the moving process in secret. I didn't even know there was such a helpline for domestic violence, but since my parents lived far away and I had no relatives nearby, it was a relief. There was also the fact that I had defied my parents' objections to become a novelist, so I couldn't rely on my family. I set the moving date, and during a weekday when everyone was away, I had my belongings moved to the apartment and I was transported there by a welfare vehicle. Living alone in the apartment, I asked for a helper to assist with my daily life. "Hello, nice to meet you." The helper, introduced by the office, was named Stella and seemed a bit older than Claire, but was energetic and cheerful. She used to work in a high position in a big company, but her husband became bedridden with a severe illness and she gave up her career for caregiving, retiring about 5 years ago. "Well, my husband passed away last year. Thankfully, he didn't suffer much." She spoke with a bright smile, but her eyes seemed somewhat sad. She decided to make use of her caregiving experience, got a helper certificate, and has been working hard. No wonder she seems so powerful. Just being around her made me feel like I could get energized. "Hey, Alice, I heard you're a novelist. What kind of stuff do you write? Tell me." When Stella asked, I told her my pen name. To my surprise, she exclaimed, "What? Alice wrote those? I read them. Hey, when you buy a book, can I get you autograph?" She was so delighted. She looked like she might jump for joy. "Okay, when my new book comes out, I'll give you a copy." I was happy to have a reader close by. "Alice, your divorce mediation isn't done yet, is it? My son just started his own law practice and is looking for work. How about it? Can you let him handle your case?" Stella offered. I had told her most of the circumstances of my move, but I was surprised her son was a lawyer. "Please, I'd appreciate your help," I answered immediately. Having been in my in-laws' house with no one to take my side, the appearance of someone reliable was reassuring. "It's unfortunate you're disabled, but you have your novels, Alice. And readers like me. Let's keep it up." I couldn't stop the tears. I won't be defeated by something like this. That's what I thought. "Sure, I'll trust the mediation to you. But is there anything else I can do?" I asked Stella. "Well," after thinking for a bit, Stella said, "your testimony alone would be fine, Alice, but we need a bit more. If your husband or Claire calls, how about recording it?" Indeed, it would be wise to keep a record of any communications from Nick or Kendrick. "Thank you. I'll give the voice recording feature on my mobile phone a try." I felt a little relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off my chest. From that day on, my mobile phone was bombarded with notifications of incoming calls from my in-laws' house from morning to night. Even though I hadn't completely unpacked yet, I decided to leave it be for a while. Besides, I wasn't in the mood to have a calm discussion with Kendrick and Claire or Nick just yet. After a week of moving into the apartment, I finally felt ready to answer one of the many calls. Of course, I had a recording feature turned on. Hello? I had barely spoken when... "Alice, where are you right now? You disappeared all of a sudden? You're not answering your phone. We were worried about you." Clear, shrill voice echoed in my ear. "Worried? Are you? Thanks for the concern, I suppose." My reply was dripping with sarcasm. "Of course. Why did you leave without discussing it with us?" Clear's voice had a panic tone as she questioned me. "I left because it seemed like the best thing to do. Isn't that what you wanted?" I retorted coldly. "That was just a joke. You know it was a joke. Please, won't you come back home?" Clear's voice was turning into a wail of desperation. "I'm useless, right? You don't need me, do you?" I continued to respond icily. "You're a successful novelist now, aren't you? I heard from Nick. Your income has increased, right? You were contributing a lot to the living expenses, weren't you? For a long time, I had been paying most of the living expenses, but it seemed Claire hadn't noticed. Well, my current income averages about $20,000 a month, I guess. When I revealed my monthly income. That much? Claire sounded surprised, but it was too late now. I plan to discuss the divorce with Nick, so it's none of your concern anymore, I said decisively, and Claire raised her voice on the other end of the phone. You should have just died when you fell down the stairs. Then I could have had insurance money by now. Claire had let it slip, and I hadn't missed it. What did you say just now? As I began to speak. Oh, that was nothing. Anyway, I'm in trouble here. Come back home. Claire denied it, but I had recorded the entire conversation. I understand. I've recorded this conversation and will use it for the upcoming lawsuit, if that's okay with you. I spoke in a businesslike manner. There was no room for sympathy anymore. They had been planning something with my life insurance, which meant I had more than just the divorce to discuss. Just wait, I'm sorry. I'll apologize, so please don't sue me. Claire's screams came through the phone speaker, but I mercilessly hung up. The next day, Stella arrived with a man in a suit. Alice, this is my son, Scott. The man introduced as Scott bowed politely and greeted me. He looked to be about Nick's age. He had recently left the law firm he worked at to start his own. I have taken the liberty of conducting an investigation into Nick's conduct. Scott pulled out a large envelope from his bag, placing several photos and documents in front of me. It appears Nick has been having an affair with a woman from his workplace. Do you recognize this woman? I recognized her indeed. When we met the new recruit at the planning meeting for the new series, introduced by Nick, I had no idea it would lead to this. The reason for his late return became annoyingly clear. I had informed Scott about the call from Claire yesterday and let him listen to the recording. I wanted to know his legal opinion. After listening, Scott closed his eyes, deep in thought. This could suggest insurance fraud, he said, opening his eyes and furrowing his brow sternly. Just then, the doorbell chimed. Oh, I'll get it. Stella stepped out to greet the visitor. Yes, who is it? Oh, please, wait a moment. She sounded flustered. But who could it be? Alice, it's Nick. What do you want to do? Stella asked me. It seemed like a good time with the lawyer there, so I said, Please, let him in. Stella passed on my message. Nick appeared, looking utterly drained. Alice, why did you suddenly disappear? I was worried. He spoke as if relieved. It's impressive you found this place, considering I kept it secret. I locked eyes with Nick as I said it. I couldn't get information from the hospital or any office, so I had to ask around before I finally found you. Nick sounded pleased, but his words no longer reached my heart. Thank you for looking, but you have a young and cute girlfriend, don't you? My words were dismissive. We broke up. It turned into a rumor at the office and she quit. I had to take responsibility. Nick's voice was pitiful, but I couldn't care less. Self-inflicted woes. So what? Chase after her? She's likely to give you children. That would be just right for you. I spoke my mind clear and sharp. I might be transferred and there's not enough money from my parents' house. It's tough. I was hoping you'd help. Please come back. I beg you. Nick pleaded with deep remorse. What a pathetic man. It's embarrassing to think I was once his wife. With a phone call from Claire, suspicions of insurance fraud had been raised. So please, discuss this with Scott, the lawyer here, along with our divorce mediation. I introduced Scott, who stood beside the bed, to Nick. Nick was stunned, motionless, then eventually left the room supported by Scott. Half a year passed, and my divorce from Nick was finalized. He had been involved with his affair partner for over a year. With irrefutable evidence, no room for argument, my demands for compensation were fully acknowledged. Kendrick and Claire faced police interrogation under suspicion of insurance fraud. Nick, involved in my life insurance policy, was also questioned for his involvement in the case. The beneficiary of the insurance was Nick, planning to use it to pay off debts and living expenses. Ultimately, the entire in-law family was charged with attempted insurance fraud, avoiding jail but receiving probation. Kendrick lost his retirement benefits due to this, and Claire was fired from the supermarket. Nick, though on probation, was laid off and now works day labor from morning till night. To pay off past debts, my compensation, and the costs for my injury and treatment, the in-laws' house was sold. The land was valuable, but after all payments, not a penny was left. Despite all our efforts, I heard they were still short on cash and had to continue paying up debts while living together in a cheap apartment. My novel has not only been published in print, but also started to be distributed as an ebook, leading to increased sales despite the so-called publishing recession. I become quite accustomed to submitting my work via computer, and the opportunities to interact with readers online have grown. On a personal note, I've started dating Scott. I had assumed he was married because he had that popular, dapper air about him, but surprisingly, it turned out he's single. He's been so focused on studying for the bar exam since college that he didn't have time for relationships. Stella teased me but also gave her blessings. It's sad that I've become paraplegic, but I'm determined not to give up and to keep fighting.
Hey, Emma, what's that about? What's with the shabby outfit? Sorry, I was told by James that it's okay to not dress formally since it's his home. Even so, there's a minimum level of manners, right? That looks totally like loungewear. Coming to someone else's house in loungewear? Don't you have basic common sense? Well, it's technically my going out clothes. Really? My apologies. I mistook it for pajamas. Sorry, I'm not familiar with such commoners' attire. When I went to my fiancé's family home with Mom, his mother, Sophia, said this as soon as she sat on the living room sofa. I knew I wasn't exactly welcomed, but her words were particularly sharp. I'm Emma, 27 years old. After graduating from college, I've been working at a general company for 5 years. I started dating James, a senior colleague, by 2 years, and it's been 2 years since then. Recently, he proposed during a date, and I immediately said yes. He's calm, kind, and makes me feel cherished. I was so happy when he asked me to marry him because I thought about how peaceful life would be with him. I was raised by a single mother. My dad passed away due to an illness when I was in elementary school. It was lonely without Dad, but Mom loved me twice as much and worked hard to raise me with great care. Although Dad had no relatives, my grandparents were healthy and often looked after me. They didn't live nearby, so they couldn't come often. They offered Mom to live with them, but she had a job she loved and couldn't make an immediate move. I loved seeing Mom lively at work, so I never wanted her to quit her job for me or spend more time with me. Emma, do you want to go to your grandparents' house? When Mom asked, I shook my head. I love them, but I'm fine because you're with me. Mom smiled happily when I said that. I tried to help with household chores as much as I could to ease Mom's burden. She was perfect at organizing and cleaning, but not so good at cooking. So, I focused on cooking. At first, I couldn't make anything complex, but even simple dishes made Mom so happy. With the desire to please her, my cooking skills improved rapidly. Mom often came home late from work, but she always made sure to check on me before going to bed. I'd turn off the lights and pretend to be asleep, thinking it would reassure her. Feeling Mom's presence by my bed, I'd fall into a real sleep. Then I graduated from high school, university, and got a job successfully. James, my boyfriend, reminded me somewhat of my late dad. I had vague memories of Dad who passed away when I was in 3rd grade, but I clearly remembered his kind smile and warm back. I felt the same warmth from James.
Our family is a bit unusual,
He told me after the proposal. He lived alone, having moved out of his family home and seldom spoke of his family. I had suspected there was something. Unusual? How?
My family has been bureaucrats for generations. My grandfather, dad, and brother, all high-ranking career officials.
Ah, wow, that's impressive.
My maternal grandfather was a top executive at a major general contractor. Both grandfathers are gone now, and Richard, my sister-in-law's father-in-law, is a politician.
I see. I felt intimidated by the titles pouring out. I wondered if I could fit into such a family. Maybe he was telling me this because he thought I might not blend in despite the proposal. Indeed, I wasn't confident about fitting in.
Basically, they think bureaucrats are the most important people in the world.
Important. I see.
People there mistake having a prestigious title for being a superior person. There's something I'd like to ask of you.
Something you want to ask? Sure, what is it? I leaned forward, wondering what it could be. Does the emphasis on titles mean they won't approve of someone from a single-parent family like me? I braced myself, wondering if this was about whether he'd still endure and stay with me. Yet, he doesn't seem at all like someone raised in such an environment. As I thought this, he seemed to read my mind and began to speak.
I'm kind of the odd one out in my family. Naturally, my parents wanted me to become a bureaucrat, and I thought I would be one. But I've always disliked their narrow-mindedness, thinking only bureaucrats are acceptable. So, I joined a trading company. Totally unrelated.
His parents never accepted him going against their wishes, labeling him a failure. They always told him to at least marry someone from a decent family. Looking down on those from less prestigious backgrounds was routine for them, thinking too highly of themselves. They even chose his friends when he was a child. Quite a troublesome family.
So, I'm really sorry, bud.
He began a surprising request, but I decided to go along with it.
I don't know what they'll say to you. Of course, I intend to protect you, but please be prepared.
Okay, I understand. He said if his family says something unacceptable to me, he's ready to cut ties with them. He's endured a lot so far, but if they judge the woman he chose by titles or wealth, he doesn't want to associate with them anymore. Not meeting the parents before marriage is an option, but he wants to at least introduce me to the family that raised him, good or bad. He also mentioned a faint hope that they wouldn't be too rude, as he is introducing a woman he wants to marry, not just a friend. His words of faint hope revealed a glimpse of his sadness. Later, his parents said, "If you're coming to greet us, bring your mother too." He informed me that he had told me that he was going to do so. I initially thought I'd meet them first, then have a family meeting, but it seems his parents and brother and his wife will all be there. It's daunting, but when I told Mom, she immediately agreed. I also briefed her about his family based on what he told me.
That sounds like a difficult family. Are you okay, Emma?
Yeah, James will protect me, I replied with a smile, and Mom nodded with a smile too. Her smile has supported me so much till now. I realized there's nothing more reassuring than having Mom with me. I also told her that James said we can ignore any snide remarks from his family. Though, knowing Mom's nature, I doubt she could simply ignore them. On the day of the greeting, full of resolve, we entered their house, and right away, Sophia started with her snide remarks.
Mom, that's rude to say right off the bat.
James rebuked her, but Sophia and his family all seemed to laugh mockingly. Indeed, they were very unpleasant. We are commoners, so we only have commoners' clothes. Sorry for that. Are the clothes you're wearing specially reserved for bureaucrats? Mom quickly responded with a laugh to Sophia's sarcasm. Sophia frowned, perplexed. Huh? He has that look on his face. She looked surprised to be talked back to. Her attitude conveyed that she was doing us a favor by accepting a daughter from a lower-class family. I've never seen such clothes, so it's quite enlightening, though they don't seem that unusual. But indeed, the fabric seems high quality and well-tailored. Who are you? Sorry for not introducing myself. I'm Olivia, Emma's mom. Thank you for having us today. It's not like we wanted to invite you.
Despite being born into a prestigious bureaucratic family, he ended up in some lowly company. A failure of a son. But still, he's our son, and we need to see who he's marrying and what her family is like.
Richard's tone was condescending, almost outdoing Sophia. But as Mom said, such unique clothing really surprised me. Is this the commoner's sense of style? We've never seen such in the upscale boutiques we visit. Right. Clothes like these would be unthinkable for me or Rachel, but they suit these people quite well. Sophia and her sister-in-law Rachel laughed through their noses at this. What a stream of sarcasm.
Stop it! Enough already!
James, what's with that tone? You, who could only work in a mere company, think that you can speak to us like that? James, we're fine.
But
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't angry. But having been forewarned by him, I was surprisingly okay. Knowing what kind of people they were from the start, I could watch them quite calmly. It's a fresh surprise to meet people unlike anyone I've known. I think of this as an experience, and it's not so bad in that light. We still had something to tell his family that we hadn't shared yet. I was thinking of saying it before we leave. Then Sophia hurled more insults. Mrs. Olivia, I heard you raised your daughter alone. Must have been tough. No, not at all. My daughter helped a lot at home, and she's been a great support to me. Mom. So, I've heard your daughter graduated from a third-tier university. What about you, Mrs. Olivia? Which university did you attend? I didn't go to college. Oh, just high school? That must have been really tough in a single-parent household, right? Were you working in a factory or something? In a factory? Well, what else can someone without education do but such work? But working in a factory is a respectable job, isn't it? At Mom's words, the in-laws all smirked mockingly.
factory work is a job for the bottom of the society. To us elites, they're a completely different breed.
Brother-in-law Daniel, adjusting his glasses, sounded like a snobbish bureaucrat straight out of a drama. A family of mean-spirited caricatures. Rachel, who married into this family, seemed influenced by them, probably having that trait to begin with. I thought it was impossible for me. James, biting his lip, stood up. He couldn't stand it anymore. But at that moment, Mom pointed at the TV. Ah! I suddenly realized the TV had been left on. I followed Mom's pointing finger. Me too. Ah! Said. Isn't that Dad? Grandpa? On the screen was Mom's dad, my grandfather. Huh? At our words, all the in-laws looked at the TV. Then, comparing the screen and us, they recoiled.
Huh? Who's that? What are you talking about?
That person on TV is my dad. Mom's reply almost knocked the in-laws off their chairs. It was almost comical. like something you'd see on a TV show, and had to stifle a laugh.
Don't be ridiculous. Look carefully. That man is Michael, a famous author who has won prestigious literary awards and a former university professor. I've even attended his lectures. You can't possibly mistake him.
The timing of my grandfather appearing on TV was unexpected, and Mom and I exchanged glances. True, my grandfather lived in the countryside but was a former university professor. He retired at 65 and now, 10 years later, became a celebrity after his post-retirement novel won several awards. So occasionally, he appears on TV like this.
That really is her grandfather.
No way!
Then you're not working in a factory?
Richard asked Mom incredulously. No one had ever said she worked in a factory. The assumption that a single mother must work in a factory is such a narrow-minded view. The idea itself is too poor. Even if Mom was a factory worker, what of it? To ridicule hard-working people, is this the behavior of a bureaucrat? There are many different types of bureaucrats, but they are definitely national civil servants. Furthermore, although Richard was always retired, he had previously worked for the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. Richard, who once held a position in the Ministry of Economy, should respect all hard-working citizens as a former government official. Such thoughts come to mind.
Why didn't you say so in the first place? If you had known, you would have changed your attitude? Of course, that's how the world works.
Oh dear. I was almost impressed by their blatant admission of changing attitudes based on occupation and titles. Good for you! Now we can welcome you as a part of our family. Sophia's sudden pleasant demeanor was unsettling.
So, James, you chose your partner considering all this? I didn't choose her based on her grandfather. I learned about him after we decided to marry.
True. I only recently told him about my grandfather after he shared his family story. It wasn't a secret, just never felt necessary to mention. My grandfather being a somewhat famous writer or a former professor had nothing to do with me. It wasn't something to boast about. I just mentioned it in passing when he talked about his family. Right, we must invite your grandfather to our next family gathering. It'll be an honor for him to be a part of our family. I was baffled at Sophia's sudden change of attitude. Mom, facing the in-laws, took a deep breath. Unfortunately, we cannot engage in familial relations with your family. Huh? People who judge others by their titles are the very people my dad despises, and I was raised by him to think the same.
What are you saying?
The in-laws must have never imagined being rejected like this. Everyone except him was blinking in disbelief. Did they think we'd be thrilled to be a part of their family just because they said so? They probably thought having a famous author as a grandfather would be another feather in their cap. But that's not how it works. I felt sorry for him. But if they think they have the right to choose their relatives, so do we. We don't need people who are swayed only by titles. However, I could only say this because he shared my views. I wondered, if he had chosen his family, could I have spoken like this? For a moment I thought about it, but the outcome would have been the same. Thinking this, I felt nothing but gratitude for him choosing me over his family. James, I'm sorry. It seems we won't be able to get along with your family after all.
Yes, that's okay. I was thinking the same.
What do you mean, James?
From today onwards, I'm cutting ties with this family. Are you out of your mind? Absolutely not. I'm nothing but disappointed in you. A complete failure. That's my line. Shall we go? Olivia? Emma?
Yes. Encouraged by him, we stood up to leave. His firm words filled me with joy. I had made the right choice in him. Just as we were about to leave, Mom suddenly clapped her hands as if remembering something. Oh, I almost forgot to mention one more thing. Hearing Mom's words, I remembered too. Recently, we received a dress order from your company, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline it. What?
Sophia was surprised. Ah, I forgot to mention my mom is the co-founder and vice president of Urban Vista, a fashion design company.
Vice president? Designer?
Urban Vista is a company my mom started with a friend. Interested in fashion design since childhood, she went to a fashion design school after high school and then worked as a designer at a famous fashion brand. She quit to get married, but she started the company when I started elementary school with a former colleague and friend. Her friend handled the management, while mom worked as a designer. The company, now 20 years old, is one of the top fashion brands in the country, with designs highly regarded internationally. James said if we had told this from the start, the in-laws probably wouldn't have opposed the marriage. But he wanted to introduce me without revealing this, wanting a family that would accept and approve of me as a person. If they were that kind of family, we wanted to continue relations, but if not, he was prepared to cut ties. I was willing to involve myself in this, but agreed to help him understand his family's true nature. I just nodded to his request. He must have been struggling with the decision to cut ties with his family. It's not easy to let go of family. He needed a catalyst.
Refuse what?
I was planning to decline later, but...
Sophia, it's about that dress for the reception, isn't it? Ah!
We're currently swamped with orders. We said we could take it later, but we were forced to do it first. Don't you know who we are? Prioritize us over anyone else, I was told.
Of course. Our order alone should be a high honor for you. You should be grateful.
We have important clients waiting for our designs. We can't accept such forceful orders. Our company isn't desperate enough to be grateful for such things.
You think you can get away with saying that? Do you understand your position?
Get away with it? What do you mean? But now I understand. Even bureaucrats don't understand human decency or common sense. Quite disappointing.
What did you say?
Sophia's eyes were blazing. Apparently, there's a reception party for foreign dignitaries, and the in-laws were invited. They had ordered dresses from my mom's company for the event. It seems Sophia had been bragging about ordering a specially made dress from Urban Vista, and now was furious at the prospect of being embarrassed by not having it. It was her decision to boast about it. Our refusal of the order was unrelated to her actions. Mom remained resolute, unaffected by the tantrum. I admire this unwavering, strong aspect of Mom. After all, she couldn't have run a company while raising a child without such strength. Ignoring the raving in-laws, we returned home. Emma, Olivia, I'm so sorry about today. I knew it would be unpleasant, yet I'm grateful you came. It's okay, I'm totally fine. Right, Mom? Yes, don't worry about it. It was good that we came in person. It's hard to convey such things over the phone. Mom said, smiling. Eventually, we had a modest wedding, surrounded by close friends and family who cared about us. Now, we live happily together with my husband and Mom. We had little to do with the in-laws, but 2 months later, news broke of Daniel's affair with a lady from a high-end club frequented by bureaucrats. The woman sold her story to a tabloid magazine, alleging she was used and discarded by a Ministry of Internal Affairs official. I thought how a regular employee wouldn't have caused such a stir, but it's tough being a bureaucrat. Naturally, Daniel and Rachel divorced, with Rachel demanding a hefty alimony. I wondered if that wasn't a problem, but Rachel, who had boasted about marrying a bureaucrat, was now shunned by her friends and living a constrained life back at her parents'. Then, Rachel suddenly appeared, ranting about the in-laws.
So from now on, we're going to be friends.
Something unintelligible, such as... Her logic was perplexing, but it seemed she thought she could get along with me, now disconnected from the in-laws.
Because you're the daughter of Urban Vista's vice president, right? Being friends with you would be something to brag about again. Then, everyone will look up to me again. Oh, And make me about 5 dresses for showing off, will you? Her character hadn't changed. Ignoring Rachel's desperate attempts, I managed to return home. My husband and mom laughed when I told them, and I found myself laughing too, despite the seriousness. Daniel had quit his job and become reclusive. Seemingly weak to setbacks, he couldn't bear the demotion and cold treatment after the scandal. He was demoted after his affair was discovered, and he couldn't go to work because he couldn't stand the cold stares he was getting from those around him. Since then,
"You're our only son now."
Richard had apparently failed in an investment and was in debt, pleading for help. In addition, Richard has apparently failed in his investments and is in considerable debt, and he is also asking for help because he is in trouble. James firmly refused, suggesting they sell the house and live off their pension. But Sophia adamantly opposed selling the house as shameful. To be so vain at this stage of the game is nothing short of irredeemable. James declined any assistance and blocked their calls. Half a year later, they sold the house and moved to a remote village, maintaining appearances. Even if they are family, it's impossible to coexist without mutual respect. A different approach or a bit of love might have led to a different future. But this is the life they chose. Forcing one's views as justice is just imposition. I reaffirmed my desire for a supportive family relationship with my husband and mom, and perhaps a new family member in the future. Always making an effort to understand each other and living with love.
Can't you think before you act? Is that why people call you thoughtless and useless? Apologize to me now, and it better be a sincere apology.
When my husband talks to me like this, I have no choice but to comply. If I talk back, we will end up in a big fight, and it might lead to divorce again. I learned from my last divorce that a woman must not defy her man. So in my next marriage, I thought I should be more submissive. But deep down, I knew that was wrong. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. This time, I'll find my happiness. That's what I thought. My name is Jory, and I'm a 35-year-old stay-at-home wife. After failing in my first marriage and going back to being single, I vowed not to make the same mistakes and have been living quietly. Thanks to my hard work, I met Brown and we got married. I'm often looked down upon, but it's better than my previous marriage, which was full of fights. I just live quietly, day by day. Brown is an energetic man, confident in himself, and a bit overbearing. Maybe because he's 2 years older than me.
You're a housewife, so you should make sure I can relax at home since I'm the one who's earning. That's what a wife's job is. Why did you put away the remote? Leave it where I sit. You're really useless.
He often complains. Or,
you need to work on being more attractive, even if it means faking youth. Make an effort to look younger than your age with makeup.
he criticizes my appearance constantly. These were issues in my previous marriage too. And back then I would talk back to my ex-husband, resulting in big fights. Now, my thinking has changed, and I've decided to keep smiling and nodding without talking back. That's what I endure now. Marriage is all about patience. That's what I believed at the time. If I couldn't endure it, I wouldn't find happiness. In this marriage, I've been pretending to be less intelligent than I am. During my previous marriage, my ex-husband would rely on me when he was in trouble, but would say,
"Smart women just aren't that charming."
I think that was one of the reasons our marriage was so unhappy. So now, I pretend to be a graduate of a less prestigious university and avoid making any insightful comments. Thanks to that, Brown has started to say,
Jory really is a naive person. That's what makes her cute.
and he seems happy with me. To be loved as a woman, I've learned that intelligence isn't necessary. I just need to agree with everything Brown says without question. But then, something happened that changed all my stereotypes. It was at a family gathering where my mother-in-law's harassment forced me to prepare and serve food and drinks for all the relatives by myself. I thought about it a little, and then realized that if I cut down on unnecessary steps and movements, I could easily handle it all by myself. While simmering the dishes, I served the one that didn't require cooking and provided drinks using all 3 burners and managing everything alone. Just when I was about to finish cooking, Brown's sister, Kylie, came over with a worried look and said,
Jory, Mom says she's sorry. Are you okay? I'll help you.
I'm almost done, so it's okay.
What? Almost done? Have you worked in the culinary industry or something?
I worked really hard, and before I knew it, everything was done. I must be a genius. Pretending to be foolish isn't as easy as it seems. I've been imitating what someone who used to get yelled at for bad test scores in school said, somehow managing to cover it up. But just because someone has bad test scores doesn't mean they're not intelligent. So eventually, a mistake will be made. Pretending to be ignorant and not using my brain, telling myself that I'm stupid. Only then can I become a wife that Brown approves of. But Kylie saw right through my act. Even though she's 6 years younger, she spoke to me with more maturity than Brown and comforted me with kind words.
Jory, don't push yourself. If you're struggling, it's okay to say so.
My brother doesn't always understand other people's feelings, so I know it can be tough. Please, rely on me during family gatherings and don't try to do everything by yourself. Hearing this, tears welled up in my eyes. Pretending to be someone I'm not was painful, and the fact that I had to act foolish to be loved was heartbreaking. Thank you. Thank you. I thanked Kylie over and over and had her help me carry the food. Since then, Kylie and I have been chatting on social media and occasionally going out together. My in-laws consist of my father-in-law working overseas, leaving mother-in-law to manage the house on her own. That's why, when mother-in-law gets out of control, there's no one to stop her. I was glad to have Kylie on my side, and that was enough. But Kylie did more than I expected. At the next family gathering, when my mother-in-law tried to push work onto me, Kylie said,
Mom, a son's wife is someone else's precious daughter. If I get married, would you treat me the same way as Jory?
She defended me. At first, mother-in-law replied,
But Jory is a divorced person, right? People who get divorced must have some character flaws. If I don't educate her properly, Brown won't be happy. She's not smart and lacks skill, so I have to be strict.
Have you ever asked her why she got divorced?
I don't know about that.
Well, that means you really need to see for yourself what kind of person Jory is. I know Jory's a good person, kind and very warm-hearted. But I'm worried because she sometimes neglects herself. You do see that, don't you, Mom?
Kylie conveyed with utmost sincerity, and mother-in-law gazed at her thoughtfully before looking serious.
Brown told me that you're struggling in your marriage because you're not very bright. But just like this kid says, even when I've given you impossible tasks at family gatherings, you've managed them effortlessly. If you were really dumb or inept, you wouldn't have been able to do them.
See? Kylie exclaimed, and mother-in-law apologized to me.
I've only been listening to Brown's opinion, and I thought it was right, Jory. I'm truly sorry for my rudeness until now.
It's all right. Mother-in-law apologized to me repeatedly. Honestly, being told to do all the cooking never made me feel uncomfortable. I never even thought it was harassment, but I was slightly happy, thinking that mother-in-law and I might get along better from now on. After that, mother-in-law was tough on Brown.
Stop complaining about Jory and start making an effort to be a good husband that matches her.
Brown was initially downcast by this, but it seemed to have wounded his pride. When he got home, he glared at me and yelled,
What did you tell Mom? Really, having a dumb wife is a pain.
I didn't say anything. Even if mother-in-law says something, just be yourself. I told her that you've always treated me well at family gatherings. My bewildered response only made Brown angrier.
Huh? You're saying you lied to me, so you don't really like me?
No, I'm always grateful. Thanks to you, I, with no education and not very bright, can live. When I pleaded like this, Brown smirked with an eerie smile.
Oh, really? Then you'll do whatever I say, right?
Yes, I'll do anything.
Then, because you messed up and I got yelled at by Mom, you'll get no allowance as punishment. I've been giving you $100 a month, but it'll be $0 now. If you want it back, just think about pleasing me every day.
Brown said that and retreated to the bedroom. Alone, I felt disheartened, muttering, was this marriage a mistake? Being prone to logical thinking, I tried to figure out what went wrong and how to do better next time. But I didn't really understand why Brown got so angry. If mother-in-law scolded him, it was his fault, not mine. I couldn't quite grasp Brown's way of thinking. Anyway, even without an allowance, I wouldn't be in trouble since I had nearly $10,000 saved up from before marriage. I didn't want to please Brown, so I continued to live as I had been. However, suddenly, for some unknown reason, Brown grabbed my arm, forced me to sit on the floor, and said,
Can't you use your head more? This is why people call you thoughtless and useless. Apologize to me. Deeply apologize to me.
I didn't understand why Brown was so angry, and I apologized, humiliated by the situation. I'm sorry, I'm not bright enough to understand why you're angry, Brown.
Really? You're the worst, incompetent woman. Don't sleep sitting like this all night. Figure out why I'm angry by morning.
Brown said, then brought his phone charger into the living room and started charging his mobile phone. At first, I didn't understand what he was doing, but after he propped the phone with its back facing me, I heard a click sound.
I'm recording you to make sure you don't move or sleep. You don't have a job since you're a stay-at-home wife, so staying up all night won't be an issue, right? But don't slack off on tomorrow's chores, or I won't forgive you,
Brown said, and then went to the bedroom alone. I was a mess of disappointment, disbelief and anger toward Brown. Regret surged within me, wondering why I had married such a man. I remembered that something similar had happened in my previous marriage. It wasn't that bad, but it seemed like my ex-husband also had a feeling of wanting to control me and wanting me to obey him at all costs. With that thought, the reasons for my failed marriages, both my previous one and the one with Brown, became clear. It was my poor judgment in choosing men. I became angry at my past self for not coming to this conclusion earlier. Choosing a man so similar to the last one, wasn't I just failing to learn from my previous mistakes? Once I understood that, the only thing left was a feeling of wanting to end this marriage, which was neither enjoyable nor anything else. All that's in me now is a resolve to absolutely divorce him. I stood up, took Brown's mobile phone, and stopped the recording. I sent that video to my own mobile phone, edited it into a 2-hour clip of me just sitting still, sent it to Brown's mobile phone, and put it back in its original place. Then, I lay down on the sofa and woke up at 6 a.m, hearing Brown rustling in the bedroom, and I went back to the floor. Brown seemed satisfied that I was sitting on the floor, but was shocked that the screen on his mobile phone had gone dark, and the video had stopped after about 2 hours.
Did you do something to the video?
Brown was making a fuss, but I pretended to know nothing, saying, "Huh? I didn't do anything. I don't really understand mobile phones." Then, Brown seemed a little calmer and said,
I'm sorry about yesterday. I got angry thinking you weren't trying to please me. I'm smart, so I didn't notice. But you're trying in your own not-so-smart way, right?
He apologized with a condescending attitude. I was irritated, but I endured it and forgave him with a smile. "Yeah, it's okay." Then Brown showed a relieved expression. Honestly, I don't care what Brown thinks because I'm gonna divorce him soon anyway. But I won't make it easy for him. I'll make sure Brown receives a fitting punishment, I thought to myself. Then, a month later, it was time for a family gathering, and Brown and I headed to my in-laws' house. I thought it would be a busy day as other relatives would be there, but when we entered the house, mother-in-law and Kylie were cooking, and I was told to sit down and do nothing. I hadn't talked much with the relatives before, but Brown started chatting with the man in front of him, and I joined the conversation. The man turned out to be Brown's uncle, and I had felt like I recognized him from somewhere before. Then Brown started to explain to me,
My uncle teaches at Harvard. You might not understand, Jory, but he's doing some impressive work in the field of chemistry.
At this, Uncle looked at my face and opened his eyes wide.
Brown, what are you talking about? There's no way Jory wouldn't understand that.
These words left me even more perplexed.
What are you talking about, Uncle? Jory graduated from a lower-tier university and can't even operate a mobile phone properly. She's not bright at all. Having a connection with a Harvard professor like Uncle.
Brown was saying this, but Uncle smiled kindly at me and said, "You're really quite excellent, aren't you? Why pretend to be foolish? Brown's the one who's actually at a much lower level. Doesn't it feel bad to be looked down on by someone like that? You should just be yourself." Uncle's loud voice caught the attention of other family members, and everyone at the table, including mother-in-law and Kylie, turned to look at us. Well, I guess you're right. I'm getting tired of being ridiculed all the time. Shall I tell the truth? Actually, I graduated from Cambridge University. After that, I attended a graduate school in America. As I revealed this, Brown's face showed shock.
What? You can't be!
I think my IQ is around 150 or so, but that doesn't mean I'm smart. I end up marrying people like Brown, after all. I chuckled, and then Kylie spoke up. Jory, could it be that your previous divorce happened because you were too smart for your husband to keep up with? I had never talked about the reasons for my divorce, but it seemed Kylie had come to this conclusion. Well, yes, that's right. My ex-husband said I was unattractive because I was intelligent. He kept saying women should be quiet and do housework and only serve their husbands. I logically refuted him every time, and he eventually said he didn't want to be with me anymore. That's why I've been pretending to be foolish in my current marriage. As I explained, Uncle nodded and said,
I knew it. You were at Harvard's graduate school for a while after Cambridge, weren't you? I thought I recognized you.
I was surprised and said, I was there for only about a year before moving to another graduate school, but you remember well. Now that you mention it, I did feel like I had seen Uncle somewhere before.
I never forget a face, though I'm not good with names. Besides, you were famous in the university for being both smart and beautiful. I thought you looked familiar, and indeed, it was you.
Uncle began to laugh proudly for some reason, while Brown's face turned pale and rigid. Seeing this as a good opportunity, I said, By the way, there's something I want to show everyone. I took out my mobile phone and played a video. It showed me sitting on the floor while Brown was instructing me to stay up all night. Brown's voice was clearly audible. Then Brown jumped up.
This is fabricated. You did this to frame me. The fact that you only filmed for 2 hours proves it was your fault, pretending to be an idiot.
As he screamed this, he grabbed my collar. The men around restrained Brown, and mother-in-law said,
I don't want to dine with such a despicable man. Please throw him out.
With that, Brown was thrown out of the house. At the entrance, mother-in-law yelled at Brown, who was crouching.
I didn't realize you were this foolish. I was foolish as well. I'll contact you later about what to do next. Go home and behave yourself.
Then she slammed the door and locked it. Then mother-in-law bowed her head to me and said,
I'm so sorry about Brown. I had no idea he did such a terrible thing. And yet, I once believed what Brown said.
She covered her face with her hands and started crying. Kylie and I supported mother-in-law's body. Mother-in-law isn't to blame, right? It's okay. I've already forgiven mother-in-law a long time ago. I reassured mother-in-law and kept repeating that until she finally recovered, put on a smile, and said, The food's getting cold. Let's eat together. We all returned to the living room. Afterward, I had conversations with Uncle about his university research, and we had enjoyable chats with other family members. Then, I divorced Brown. Brown said he didn't want to be with a woman like me, so the divorce and property division went smoothly. At the end, when I showed him the passbook with $10,000 in savings that I had saved before marriage, Brown made an incredibly frustrated face and said,
I should have been kinder, even though I thought you were not smart. I'm sorry. You won't forgive me anymore, will you? I'm sorry.
He regretted and apologized. But it was too late now. I ended my relationship with Brown without listening to his words. Afterward, it seems Brown was disowned by mother-in-law and cut off by Kylie. He sought help from relatives, but no one paid attention to him, and he is living a lonely life. Since then, I have found a job and I'm working hard. Who came up with the idea that a woman's happiness is in marriage? I can live happily without getting married. And now, I can focus on what I want to do. This is when I can be myself the most. Although I divorced Brown, I have built a good relationship with Kylie afterwards. I plan to never forget being myself and occasionally meeting and spend fun times with those I want to get along with.